Okay, so in this video I'm just continuing working on this portrait image, I guess you'd call it that. This is how far I got in the previous video. I noticed that the face seems kind of wider than the reference image, so I'm gonna try and fix that. Okay, so basically I think what looks a bit off is maybe the mouth. It looks a bit low, too low. As you can see, the top of the lip kind of aligns with one of the knuckles on this hand. But over here it's a little higher than that. Same with the bottom of the mouth. It should be closer to the tip of the finger, I think. So I'm just going to kind of select the part that I want to raise and shift it up a bit. Not quite sure how much though. It kind of looks, yeah, I like that. Seems alright there. Just gonna fill in these pixels. Okay, so it's shifted up a bit. I think that helps. But the chin looks a bit too big, I think, too wide, or the jaw maybe. So how do I fix that? Maybe on the right side, kind of come in a bit further. Let's just try shifting it for now and see how it affects the image. Okay, so if we do that, kind of smooth this area out a bit. This area can kind of be a little shaded because it's kind of going back into the dark area. See how that looks. I think it's too angled. It looks alright, but it's not quite like this image over here. I think chin comes out slightly. Does that look better? Something seems off with it. I think it looks fine with it angled down like that. Looks more accurate to the image, but the face still seems to something. Maybe this part needs to be less angled. Maybe the cheek could come in a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. Or better, I think. It's not completely accurate, but I think that's pretty good looking. I want to make sure I have some of the subtle shadows just so that the face can have a little bit more form to it. Otherwise it would just kind of look a bit flat. So I want to make sure some of these slight differences in value kind of cover more space so that it kind of pushes things a bit more, kind of plays with the depth of the skin, I guess. That looks pretty good. There's like a slight line going there. think it's like a shadow from the finger, basically. Was that like that before, or did I do that? I guess I did that somehow. Okay, yeah, looks a bit better. Okay, so basically just keep looking at details and see what needs to be adjusted, basically. I mean, the process isn't that difficult, it's just you have to do it over and over again, and so it's just repetitive, like I said in the previous video. I don't know, it doesn't require much thought sometimes. Like up here it's darker, obviously, so I'll basically just choose a darker color, tone, and make it darker, basically. And it's darker because the hair is kind of covering the forehead. When you're creating realistic looking images, it doesn't necessarily matter that you know why something looks the way that it is. As long as you draw it the way that it is, or the way that you see it, it should look more accurate, rather than, you know, if you think you know how something should look and you draw it the way you think it should look, chances are you'll probably not draw it the way that it's actually the way that it actually looks in the real world. Because, you know, there's a lot of things that you don't know how to convey realistically, like the way the light bounces off of various surfaces and things like that. It gets really complicated, and for a person it's hard to kind of know exactly how that presents itself in every situation. So like, you might know how to draw like a person's face, but unless you have like a reference, you're not going to be able to draw it completely accurately, I guess, or in a way that looks real, I suppose. I mean, it's probably possible, but it would take a lot of practicing and exercising, and even so, you'd be practicing in like basically the ideal circumstances. So like, you'd be kind of what's the word? Stuck to drawing it only like certain ways, basically. The ways that you've exercised. Which is fine, but it's like, I don't know. There's limits to everything, I guess, basically, is what I'm saying. And I used to like do a lot of realistic looking artwork and stuff like that, just because that's the general preferred way for artists to kind of learn how to draw. You know, they draw what they see, basically. And it's also kind of impressive when you can kind of draw something that looks kind of real, I guess, or convincing, I guess. But you know, after a while of doing that, just kind of wore off. My interest of it kind of wore off because it doesn't tell me, it doesn't really speak to me that much, you know, and it doesn't speak any differently than just looking at something in reality as compared to just looking at the image that I drew. You know what's different if you've drawn it realistically. It's like, what are you adding to your experience? I guess just the satisfaction of drawing it realistically, I guess. But you know, once you're able to do that, you kind of wonder whether you should keep doing that, you know, or if you should try something more challenging, I guess, or something that you haven't done before, like maybe something more abstract or symbolic or something like that. Something that might reveal something new. About yourself, I guess. Because if you're drawing something that isn't realistic, chances are it relates more with yourself. Because it doesn't originate from outside yourself. With the realistic art, it's all just observing what's outside of yourself. But if you're creating something that isn't realistic, that doesn't exist in like the real world, comes from your mind and your imagination and things like that. So it's more representative of who you are, I guess. And even though it doesn't look realistic, so like it's harder to understand it, I guess. Even though it's like hard to understand, it's more true to yourself, I guess. And so like, in a way, everyone is something that is hard to understand, I guess. Because we're all different. Anyways, what am I doing? I'm just rambling on. Because why? Because this is repetitive. That's why. Trying to convey something different, trying to think what to say about this that I haven't said before, because I don't like repeating myself that much. As an artist, I like being creative and thinking of new things and stuff like that. It makes things more interesting that way, I think. But yeah, I'm just kind of adding more values. You know, some of this stuff that I'm doing right now doesn't necessarily, not necessarily looking at the reference and like being precise as to like every single pixel that I put down, whether or not it'll represent the reference that well. I'm just kind of doing what I know will help the image kind of look better. Like some parts like here are very, you know, jagged looking, so I'll just put like these intermediary values here, just kind of smooth them out and kind of help convey that line, the direction that it's going. Like right here, for instance, if I look over here, it's kind of lighter there, so I should probably lighten it up a bit. Actually, there's not much black right there. But yeah, it helps looking at the image and trying to make it look similar, because then you get something that looks like the image or the reference, since that's what we're trying to do. Sometimes it's like, whoa, it actually looks real. You know, when you make something look more real, it's kind of surprising, because like, you know that it's not real, and the fact that it looks kind of real kind of makes you kind of look longer at it, because you're like trying to figure out why it looks real, I guess. I feel like there should be a value between these. I don't know if I have one that I've used. I don't think so. Should probably create another value just to help smooth that out a bit. Because right now it looks a bit segmented between these two values here. Let's open up the color thing. So those two values are like that. So I'll just try and find something between those. That should work. Basically, I just took like the average between those two. I'm going to use it to kind of smooth out things a bit. It's basically, you know, like smudging if you like take a pencil and you draw and then you like smudge it with your finger, it's basically like doing that, basically, is what I've done. Okay, so this part looks a little too light. Maybe I could just use, actually, do I have a, I think that, I guess I'll create another value, unless I just do this. So I'll do that. Although I do think there should be another value here. Basically, I'm just going to create another average between those. Maybe just a little bit more. Okay, that looks good. Just to kind of smooth that out a bit more. All right. Could probably use that value up here now. Okay. Put another value in the tongue because the tongue looks kind of pinkish and I don't have a light pink color. So I'm just gonna try and create one, a light pink. That should be alright. That'll kind of help with the shape of the tongue. Does that look alright? I guess that looks alright. I think this side's kind of too pointy. Yeah, looks alright. Okay, I kind of want to do the hair a bit, kind of flesh out the hair. Hair can be a bit tricky because there's a lot of lines, a lot of strands of hair, which, you know, if you're not used to drawing hair, you may want to like draw all the hairs, and so like that can kind of make things look a bit too busy. So, you know, instead of drawing all the hairs, you should just kind of draw just kind of selectively draw certain strands and kind of group other strands together, just kind of get the general direction of the lines. I would kind of focus on the darkest areas. Compared to the lightest areas, and kind of find an average between those that you can kind of work with. Don't do like the whole spectrum of values in the hair, 'cause that'll probably force you to kind of do too many different strands of hairs, which will make it look a bit busy. I don't know, you just gotta use your judgment, basically. Whatever looks good. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it, because you'll recognize different ways to kind of convey things. Usually where things are brighter, you have more like more detail being seen because there's more light. revealing the details. Usually it's harder to see details and shadows because there's less light going to your eye, and so like there's less being seen, I guess. That's how light works, based on how light works, basically. Unless everything's darker, like you're in a cave or something, and then like there's like a bright light, spotlight or something, then the spotlight will probably be hard to see details in it because it's like overexposed or something like that. And so then all the shadow areas would be easier to see. I'm not being totally accurate with the hair. I'm just kind of adding details, kind of help suggest that it's hair. I'm not too worried about drawing every strand and, you know, every hair in the correct place that it needs to be, because there's so many hairs. It's not that important like where each one is, as long as the ones that you do draw kind of help you understand that it's hair. You know, that's what we're trying to get across, basically. So it looks pretty good so far. And that's just with like 1, 2, 3, 4 values, basically. Like 1, this highlight, 2, the red, 3, the darker purplish color, 4, the black. Just 4 values, and you get a pretty good sense that there's hair there. Like hair going crazy over there. I don't know what's going on. Let's do that. Should be alright. Sometimes it's okay to make random pixels, random shapes, if you know thing you're trying to convey doesn't necessarily have any clarity to it. Like this area here, it's like just a bunch of like squiggles there, and it's like hard to see which hair is going which way. So you just kind of do something random there, and you know, your mind will just kind of be like, you know, there's some hairs there, and it doesn't necessarily know what direction and doesn't need to know. Top of the hoodie, there's no black there. As you can see, it just kind of blends into the background. Looks good for hair, doesn't it? I'm pretty satisfied with that. Still have to do the other areas though. Oops. Okay, so it's like shadowed area here. I may need to create another value, but for now I'll just kind of try and see if I could do it with just these values. You know, and the pixels are only a certain dimension, and it's, you know, as you can see in here, there's like a lot of strands here, but I can't fit all those strands with the size pixels that I have, so you know, I could only fit like basically 2 strands here, but that's enough, I think. If it isn't enough, then I don't know, I'll have to find another way. Sometimes you just gotta you know, settle for what is possible. Settle for what's possible, and if things change down the line that allow you to do something better, then change it later. But for now, I think that looks pretty good. Seems a bit, I think it needs to be darker here. I'll leave it for now because it looks fine. Yeah. Okay, so the hair looks kind of feathered around here. It's also darker. It's not this light. It's not this bright light red or whatever. It's like some dark red. What should I do? What's this? No, that's not right. I kind of like the red though. Okay. If that's there, maybe let's just try this. I could always change this back if I want to, if I need to. Just gonna try and darken this area. Just darken that a bit more. Bit more. Okay. Okay, now seems a bit too dark. I like the values, but I need to kind of brighten this area back up a bit. And then kind of actually see it? Maybe I could just kind of extend it. Kind of like that. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that looks a bit better. And I have what, like one, is it one extra value or is it two? Seems like two. Probably don't need one of these values looks the same as the other. Probably remove that. Should I remove it? Should I darken it? I'll just leave that there, I guess. Okay, it's like a strand going down there. Kind of just blends together around here, around this area, because the hairs look feathered and stuff like that. probably move on to another area. Before it looks too overworked. Let's do the other side. This side looks like it should be dark. Maybe if I just kind of do that, kind of extend it over, and then start blending those. Okay, like that, I guess. As you can see, it's kind of hard to convey too many strands because there's not much space. And try to put more in there. As you can see, it's kind of difficult. Okay, should be dark around here, I think, right there. Just kind of, I don't know, darken this whole area. This video's getting kind of long. I don't know if I should fast forward it or what. Probably fast forward some parts. As you can see, it looks pretty good so far. I'm getting kind of tired of looking at the same thing over and over again. It's kind of one of the difficulties of drawing realism, realistic images, that sort of thing. Sometimes it's good to draw like the general shape before you start adding in the strands of hair. Like I'm drawing in like the general surface, if all the hairs are kind of like stuck together. And then I'll kind of go in and draw more detail like this. I don't know if I like that highlight there. It's a bit too much. Sometimes a lot less is more, sometimes. Well, usually. Although at the end here kind of gets lighter. Just gonna put like a dark background here, just so I have something to contrast these hairs a bit. Actually isn't that long, it should end up there. Guess it doesn't really matter. Yeah, needed like a value, intermediate value between these two. Seemed like I had one. Okay, let's try and finish up this hair. I have like these strands going all over the place. Okay, so background. I don't know if I'm gonna make the background that dark. Although there's certain dark value, darkness to it, I guess. Okay, there's a lot of weird strands going on over here, so I'm just going to kind of do that. It should look alright if I just do that, basically. It's kind of hard to see where the hood ends and where the background begins. And perhaps it doesn't really matter. Like I said before, as long as you get the impression that it's there, your mind will kind of fill in the pieces. Pretty good. Okay. Actually, let's just do this, see how that looks. Yeah, it looks alright. Probably would look better if I actually had more of the background. Create a lighter shade up here. Oh, it's actually like that. That's weird. Okay, so just want to get a feel for the background. Looks pretty good. It's also pretty dark over here. Okay, I think we're almost done with the hair. Yep, looks good. Okay. I think I'm going to take a break, and I'll come back to it another time. So that's that for now.